In the year 793, on a quiet morning in the northeast of England, however, as long, narrow ships approached from the sea, this silence was shattered by blood and fire. The Vikings had arrived. The children of the north, with their swords and axes, were about to change the course of history. This was just the beginning. So, why did the Vikings attack England? And could the English stop this invasion? Let's explore it together. The Vikings were some of the most feared warriors of the Middle Ages. However, they were much more than just warriors. Coming from the northern regions of Scandinavia, especially Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, they were also known as merchants, explorers, and sailors. So, why did these powerful warriors target England? There were several reasons for this. First, the harsh nature of Scandinavia. The Vikings lived in cold, mountainous, and infertile lands. Because of this, making a living from agriculture and finding resources was difficult. The rich lands and wealthy monasteries of England were a huge attraction for them. England, with its vast fertile fields and prosperous religious structures, stood out. The second reason was their seafaring and exploration spirit. The Vikings were excellent sailors and had mastered long voyages with their long ships. By attacking England's coasts, they saw an opportunity for new lands and riches. Additionally, the Viking leaders, especially the kings and commanders from Denmark and Norway, had recognized the weak defenses of England. At the time, England was divided into small kingdoms, which was a major opportunity for the Vikings. Pressure from continental Europe and internal conflicts also contributed to the increase in raids. Lastly, war and victory held great significance in Viking culture. They didn't just fight to conquer lands, but also to earn recognition as honorable warriors and to showcase their heroism on the battlefield, which was a huge honor for them. For these reasons, the Vikings targeted England, and in 793, they launched their first raid on Lindisfarne Monastery, making a lasting mark on history. The Vikings made their mark in history in 793 by raiding Lindisfarne Island in northeastern England. This was the Vikings' first major invasion, and it became an event that deeply shook England. Lindisfarne was known as one of England's most important religious centers. The Lindisfarne Monastery located there was one of the most sacred and wealthiest buildings of the time. The monastery was of great importance to Christianity and was filled with religious relics, gold, and silver. The Vikings, with their well-prepared and fast-moving longships, approached the island and unexpectedly raided the monastery. The surprise attack took advantage of the monastery's defenselessness, leading to the slaughter of many monks and locals. This raid shocked not only the people of England, but all of Europe. At the time, the Vikings were known as ruthless warriors, and such attacks came to be associated with their stealth, speed, as well as brutality and savagery. After the Lindisfarne raid, the Vikings began targeting other monasteries in England. These raids were aimed not only at religious structures, but also at lands and wealth. The raids they carried out in search of riches and loot led to the Vikings becoming a force that threatened all of Europe. Lindisfarne also symbolized the beginning of the Vikings' continuous assaults on England. This raid showed that the Vikings not only aimed to conquer land, but also sought to exploit England's vulnerabilities to gain political and economic control over the region. The Vikings didn't just raid the coasts of England, they also captured land and established settlements. This process significantly altered the political structure of England. One of the Vikings' greatest successes was the creation of the region known as Danelaw. Danelaw referred to the Viking-controlled territories in the north and east of England. This area became a place where Danish Vikings had the power and authority over government and law. Danelaw was a region where the Vikings implemented their own laws and culture, and it was a place where they constantly clashed with the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of England. The Vikings thrived in areas such as agriculture, trade, and crafts. They also created a cultural and economic blend by interacting with the local English population. This dominance symbolized not only the Vikings' military victories, but also their territorial gains and the social changes occurring in England. Danelaw marked a turning point in the Vikings' lasting influence and territorial expansion in England. However, the struggles between the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons signaled the beginning of a long-running war. The Vikings' presence in England left permanent marks not just militarily, but also culturally and economically. The Vikings' influence in England lasted for many years. However, their raids on England reached their peak in the 9th and 10th centuries. Especially under the leadership of Alfred the Great, the Anglo-Saxons mounted a strong resistance against the Vikings. Alfred the Great, as the ruler of the Kingdom of Wessex, managed to successfully defend against the Vikings. In 878, at the Battle of Edington, he decisively defeated the Viking army, thwarting their plans to conquer England. This victory marked a turning point in the battle against the Viking threat in England. Afterward, the Vikings' lands in Danelaw began to weaken. The increasing resistance from the Anglo-Saxons and internal Viking conflicts gradually diminished their dominance over England. By the early 11th century, the Vikings started to lose their former power. In 1066, at the Battle of Hastings, the last Viking king, Harold Hardrada, made one final attempt to invade England, but his efforts ended in defeat with the victory of the Duchy of Normandy. This battle signified the end of Viking rule in England. The Vikings, through their raids on England, not only gained land, but also deeply influenced the cultural and social structure of England. Areas like Danelaw, under Viking control, left a lasting mark on the legal and societal framework of England. The Vikings' contributions in language, art, and trade further strengthened this legacy. By imposing their culture and laws, the Vikings helped shape England, ultimately enriching English culture in the long run. Their craftsmanship and trade activities in the regions they settled also transformed England's economic structure. In the end, the impact of the Vikings was not just about an invasion. It turned into a process of cultural exchange and social transformation. After this period, England inherited the Vikings' legacy as cultural diversity and economic prosperity. The Vikings were not only warriors, but also entrepreneurs, seafarers, and cultural influencers in history. Over time, the Vikings' influence played a crucial role in shaping both England and Europe. The impact of the Vikings on England is written not just through wars, but through culture, society, and history. Today, this legacy continues to live on as a force emerging from the depths of time,